A professional chef who numbs his grief with casual flings rethinks his choices after a life-changing accident. One night, a chef, Tom, arrives at a bar to celebrate finalizing the deed to his restaurant. There, he accidentally bumps into the beautiful Sarah. Years later, during a camping trip by the beach, the chef dives into the water and emerges holding a lobster. He marvels at how delicious the lobster would taste, but his now-girlfriend Sarah begs him not to kill the animal. Hours later, Sarah tells Tom to leave the lobster, whom she named Louis, alone. The following day, the man sees the empty bucket, and when Sarah gives him a sarcastic look of surprise, he realizes that the woman released the lobster back into the ocean when he wasn't looking. During the restaurant's opening night, the staff, including Sarah, celebrates the occasion with champagne. Years into their marriage, the woman shows her husband the dent on their car and says she indicated right but turned left. One evening, the mother tells their son Oscar a fanciful tale about how a lobster named Louis saved her and his father from drowning in the ocean. While making love, Tom notices a lump on his wife's chest, but she brushes off his concern. One night, Sarah admonishes her husband for failing to spend time with her, so he jokes that he has to work and doesn't have the luxury of staying at home and enjoying the benefits of having a terminal illness, eliciting laughter from his wife. The next day, while he caresses the woman's hair, one lock falls from her head. Then, she tells him that after she dies, he should look for her when it's his turn. After a routine checkup, the doctor informs the chef about his wife's worsening condition. Weeks later, when Tom's late picking up his son from school, the boy tells him that Sarah's already there. The visibly ill Sarah gets into a taxi with her son, and when her husband asks why she's taking a cab, the upset woman exasperatedly yells that she can't drive. One evening, Tom walks in on the woman crying in the living room. He asks what's wrong, and the woman says she doesn't think she can go on much longer. Days later, the chef stops by the restaurant to inform Sally, the establishment's manager and their friend, that Sarah decided to stop chemotherapy and deal with the illness on her own. Karen catches wind of her sister's decision, so Sarah tells her husband that having the crying woman in their house was precisely the reason why she didn't want anybody to know she'd stopped chemotherapy. After Sarah leaves the room, Karen tells Tom she knows he's against his wife's decision. He confirms, but adds that when a person's faced with their mortality, it seems they get to do whatever they want. One evening, Oscar asks his father if he'll be exempted from schoolwork because his mother has cancer. The man says it doesn't work that way, and the child remarks that it's unfair. Later, Sarah arrives but goes straight to bed. Oscar excitedly jumps beside her, and she angrily admonishes the child for being too rough. After Tom sends the boy to bed, he reprimands his wife for taking out her frustrations on Oscar, especially since their son only wants to spend time with her. The remorseful woman apologizes and says she's constantly in pain. One morning, Tom helps Sarah down the stairs and explains she has to stay at the hospital to make her last days more comfortable. She breaks down in tears and argues that the only reason he wants her to stay at the hospital is so he won't have to take care of her. The woman says she's scared she might not come home again. So Tom promises that as soon as they sort out the pain she's dealing with, he'll take her straight home. At the first floor landing, Sarah asks her husband to grab her makeup bag from upstairs. He says he'll find it later, but the woman argues that he'll forget if he doesn't bring it with him now. While the man heads upstairs, she slowly shuffles toward the front door. However, when she runs into an obstacle, she calls out to Tom, who hurriedly returns. To his bemusement, he finds the woman standing in the hallway, impeded by the suitcase. He jokes that she should jump over it, eliciting laughter from Sarah. Before they head out, the ill woman asks the chef to promise that he'll bring her home, but all he musters as a response is a somber smile. Days later, Tom sits in his car with Oscar in the back seat, and he explains his wife's inevitable death to their son. However, the child refuses to accept his explanation and then curses the doctors and his father. During Sarah's final moments, a nurse informs Tom that he doesn't have much time left with the woman. The chef tells his wife he loves her and gives her one last kiss on the cheek. As Sarah takes her last breath, the man promises to find her when he ultimately passes. Through a phone call, Karen expresses her gratitude that he was with her sister during her final moments. Then, a nurse tells Tom he can enter Sarah's room, so he ends his phone call with a mournful sister-in-law. In the hospital room, he sits next to the lifeless woman's body. Later, while the father and son stand next to Sarah's bed, Oscar holds the man's hand. Hours after his wife's passing, Tom meets with Catherine, who informs him that because of the cancer, the woman's retinas are the only part of her body viable for donation. He argues that Sarah was worth more than that, so Catherine explains they've got a diabetic patient whose eyesight could be restored. After Sarah's funeral, the chef envisions the woman hugging Oscar one last time. Then, he watches as his wife's casket rolls into the incinerator for cremation. In bed, the chef repeatedly listens to a voicemail message Oscar and Sarah recorded. One night, a persistent customer angers the chef because he complains about the undercooked duck, so Tom wipes the meat on dirty surfaces all over the kitchen before deep frying and serving it to the customer. After the shift, the man sees random objects spontaneously combust in flames beside him. Days later, the chef meets with two real estate agents regarding the sale of his house. At the restaurant, the chef hovers a knife above a lobster, unable to take its life. Then, Sally pesters him about a missed booking, which he didn't write down. When a waiter asks about the lobster, Tom says it's off the menu because the produce they procured isn't fit to serve. Later, the chef drops a hot pan on the floor, and then he places his hand over the open flame, burning himself on purpose. The chef goes to the hospital for treatment of his injury. Immediately after, he heads to the 6th floor to see the man he's certain received Sarah's retinas. However, the man's bed is empty, so he asks where the patient is, and a woman in an adjacent bed says he died. Tom barges into the emergency room, yelling at Catherine for lying to him and giving Sarah's eyes to a dead man. Due to his outburst, two security guards escort him from the building, but Sarah's doctor recognizes him. Later, the physician speaks to the chef and explains that no one died, but that he's also legally prohibited from telling Tom to whom he gave Sarah's retinas. The older man reminds him that his wife was a registered donor, and giving parts of her body to those who may need them was what she wanted to do. Then, Tom asks why the doctor agreed to stop Sarah's treatment. The physician clarifies that it was a decision the couple made together, but the chef corrects him and says it was solely his wife's choice. The doctor acknowledges the difficulty the man must have dealt with accepting Sarah's decision, and says he has nothing but respect for what the couple did. Hours later, he meets the inebriated Leslie at a bar when her constant teasing amuses him. The following day, the woman thanks Tom for their time together and clarifies that last night was a freebie, revealing that she is a courtesan. Before she leaves, Leslie hands him her card and tells him to give her a call if he requires her services. One evening, the chef runs into Lisa and her friends at a restaurant, and she introduces him to Miriam, a therapist. Days later, Tom has drinks with Miriam, who acknowledges he wants to see her not because he's ready to confront the grief from his wife's death, but because he only wants to sleep with her. That evening, while Tom and Miriam make love, Oscar walks into the room and screams. The startled woman didn't know he had a child, and the boy remarks that he doesn't like her. So the annoyed therapist puts on her clothes and admonishes the chef for withholding the information. The next day, the therapist says Tom can't play patient with her just because they slept together one time. She adds that he can't continue ignoring his grief because he might go too far out that he can't find his way back. However, the chef asks what if he never wants to find his way back. On Oscar's birthday, the father and son walk across the park to the party venue. Suddenly, a man playing rugby bumps into the chef, causing him to fall on the cake. Due to the people laughing at his misfortune, the man throws a tantrum and trashes the group's picnic. After Karen bails him out of prison, she tells the brother-in-law that it might be best if Oscar lives with her for a while. After the conversation, the chef walks toward his vehicle to inform his son that he'll live with his aunt temporarily. In a motel room, Tom reprimands his son for wearing a curly hair wig, but he apologizes immediately for the outburst. That night, Oscar asks his father if he can sleep in his bed because of the thunder outside. The boy asks the man if his mother knew she was gonna die. The father says yes, but emphasizes that she did everything she could to stay with them, but she was too sick. Then, the child wonders if his mother's with Louis, and the man says maybe. While the father and son are at the pool, Karen arrives and admonishes the man for failing to take her nephew to school. That evening, the man drops by the married Lisa's house, and they kiss by the front door before agreeing to see each other another time. Later, he meets a woman at a club whom he then makes love to in his car. The next day, when the man has to step away for a moment, he calls the woman he met at the club and asks her to babysit Oscar. The next day, Karen sees the for sale sign outside Tom's house, and Oscar asks if his father's selling the home. That evening, the woman barges into the restaurant to confront the chef about the decision to sell the house. When he says he is only doing so because he's struggling, Karen screams that he isn't the only one struggling and throws plates of food everywhere. Later that night, the inebriated chef stops by Karen's house hoping to speak to the woman, but her husband Graham tells him to give her and Oscar some space. While walking home, Tom spots a curly hair wig on a mannequin head in a storefront. During a session with Leslie, the man watches the courtesan as she wears a curly wig and acts like Sarah. Days later, when the chef drops Oscar off at school, the other parents coldly stare at him. The boy says he'd like to live with his father, and Tom argues that he already does, but the child counters he hasn't stayed with him much since the disastrous birthday party. One morning, while the chef intently stares at a lobster inside an aquarium, his old friend Brian greets and hugs him. After recounting his wife's final moments, Brian tears up, and after Tom drops him off, he tells his friend how lucky he was to have Sarah. At an intersection, the chef sees a man with bandages over his eyes crossing the street. He pulls over and follows the blind man across a park. When the visually challenged person asks who's following him, Tom stops in his tracks but doesn't answer. So the blind man begs the person following to leave him alone. After returning to his car, Tom calls Lisa, and soon he's at her house doing the deed in the kitchen. Days later, the chef sits in his car and finds Sarah's wallet in the glove compartment. Inside, he takes a folded piece of paper and realizes it's Oscar's drawing depicting Louis saving him and his wife from the waves. That night, Tom drops by Karen's house, where they drink wine and reminisce about their happy memories with Sarah. While he sits in his vehicle parked by the house, the chef envisions the tree in the front yard going up in flames. In a hotel room, Tom has difficulty finishing in front of the courtesan. The woman suggests that she help him out, but the man politely declines her offer. Then, the man ends their transactional relationship, which she gracefully accepts. When he passes the living room to leave, he steps on a lobster toy on the floor and learns that the courtesan has a daughter. While gathering fresh produce for the restaurant, the exasperated man argues on the phone with his sister-in-law. At the dock, a fisherman holds up a giant lobster, and the sight takes him aback. Tom hurriedly leaves the slaughterhouse to make it to Oscar's recital. In an intersection, an SUV barrels into the man's car. The vehicle rolls over several times, causing his purchased produce to fly all over the cabin. Seconds after the impact, the injured man states that he indicated right but turned left. Suddenly, a fire ignites on the road beside his overturned car. In the emergency room, paramedics wheel in Tom's bloody and unconscious body on a gurney. When the doctor assesses his condition, he notes the patient's massive blood loss. The doctors inspect the chef's body and find different organs under his clothes. They wonder how he could possibly still be alive, but then realize that the flesh and blood they thought were the patient's are the assorted fresh meats inside the car with him. The doctor says that aside from a few minor cuts and bruises, the man's perfectly fine. That afternoon, the chef arrives at the school to watch Oscar's recital. After the presentation, Karen drops the father and son off at their house. Then, the pair take down the for sale sign, implying that Tom's changed his mind about selling it. In the backyard, the man sobs as he holds the vegetables that grew in Sarah's garden. When Oscar hears his father crying, he comforts him. Then Tom stands up, holds his son's hand, says he has his mother's eyes, and suggests he cook them something special for dinner.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.